Good afternoon. I wanted to make a video because I got a really good email and I want to talk about it. And also I wanted to wear my new shirt. I wanted to show off my new shirt that I got that I talked about yesterday in my Book of Mormon extraordinaire video I made. Because, right, if you look at this shirt, all wives matter. And it looks like a wine cork, so I got really excited. It actually has 7 circles within it, which is coincidental and correlates to the proton, but seven circles could be referenced to, right? Because I talked about how yesterday the Book of Mormon has 6 lines. If you view the word like 6 blocks. And so this has 6 or 7 circles, so it could be representing Mormons, plural, right? Which coincidentally goes along with all wives matter. And I know in the comments, right, because from within the paradigm, people that are familiar with this person's face, right, because I had no idea that's what Joseph Smith looked like. So if you look at this shirt, what it essentially could even be perceived as, for someone that's unfamiliar with the paradigm and the history there, is that this is a man that fought for women's rights, right? Because women, wives, oftentimes, they didn't gain the ability to write until like recent in human history. So technically this could be perceived as, hey, this guy was fighting for women's rights, and that's why this shirt arose, all wives matter, right? Because who doesn't want to fight for women's rights? Especially wives. Their lives matter. That's why their name, coincidentally, spells lives and wives. Utilizes the same letters. Anyways, I digress. Talking about the concept of polygamy. If you look at what it's basically doing, right? Look at the male gender. What do they oftentimes desire and love, if not acts of physical intimacy with women? Who doesn't want to be surrounded first and foremost by beautiful human beings that are often defined and labeled as female? So because of that, imagine a boy, imagine a man, imagine any male at one point in his life, the thought or idea crossed his head, imagining what it would probably be like to live a physical existence where they were surrounded by multiple beautiful women. That's a dream I can get behind. I mean, who doesn't want to be surrounded by pretty things all day? Okay. So it's understandable, again, that the concept arose, right? The thought, the idea arose, and people tried to literally utilize it in practice in real life. People learn through very different ways, and oftentimes, right, moments of existential ecstasy, of physical ecstasy, often invoke a very profound state of clarity in those moments. And so cognition, consciousness, the capacity to increase the depth of understanding and thought occurs during those moments. And so maybe, perhaps Joseph Smith desired to learn that way. So he made a way for him to be able to learn. Anyways, I digress, right? I have fun with everything. Anything, right? Because if anything in life is correlated to learning. And so any action that a human takes is them demonstrating they are trying to learn how to better understand life, the concept of life, right? Because no one can dare claim with accuracy that they know what's going to happen tomorrow or in the future. The future itself exists in a state of what quantum physics and scientists would define as superposition, meaning all possibility and probability exist in the future, right? Nothing's defined yet until it collapses into observable reality. Well, how do things collapse into observable reality if not a coordination of the movement that is occurring, which coincidentally, all humans move. Anyways, so this email I got from this human being, oh, it's been so much fun. They are really excited about reading the Book of Mormon and sharing their thoughts. And I was like, yes, please send them. And so I want to make a video on it because we're having some really good conversations. So I have no idea how long this video is going to be. But this person wrote their perspective of what they can perceive from the First Book of Nephi. And apologies again for if I pronounce things wrong, because it reminds me, if anyone's seen the movie Lord of War, where the warlord and Nicolas Cage's character is like the gun of Rambo or whatever. He's like, I desire to have the gun of Rambo. And it's like, it's Rambo's gun or something like that. He keeps pronouncing it weird. And he's like, I like it my way. The warlord says that, I like it my way. So that's what I think of every time I accidentally mispronounce things. So I'll try to remember to utilize the pronunciation that the framework utilizes. And so this person was just so inspired to share and reread the Book of Mormon, and they're starting from the First Book of Nephi. And so I'm going to read what they wrote and what they perceived, because it's so extraordinary, this back and forth we're having. And so they first start out by saying, here's my paraphrased and summarized account according to my understanding of my reading of 1 Nephi in the Book of Mormon. This also has my notes in addition information, which I have included in brackets in blue. It will be interesting, as always, to see what you get out of 1 Nephi. And again, right, this person highlights, hey, I want to share with you my paraphrased and summarized account of what speaks to me, what resonates to me according to my understanding. They're demonstrating, hey, this is me trying to practice learning, and you clearly love learning, so I'm trying to invoke a state of learning to expand my understanding by interacting with you. Oh, and I love it, love it, love it, love it. Okay, so he starts out by saying the First Book of Nephi. Okay, this book is a story about a stranger ending up in a strange land. Yeah. It starts out by telling the story of a man called Lehi. Lehi is a place name where Samson, and this is his comments, Lehi is a place name where Samson slayed the Philistines with the jawbone of a jackass. See Judges, blah, blah, blah. This may indicate where this family lived. And I love that they're comments, you'll see them. Lehi is a father with several children, of which some are prudent and some are careless. Lehi is also a well-to-do man. It does not indicate what Lehi did for a living other than he had a lot of wealth. I imagine that this man had his fingers in several pies, such as agriculture, trading, and shipping goods from Egypt to Palestine area. First off, okay, that summary alone demonstrates, hey, Lehi is a human at one point in time that is extraordinary, and this is an account of what he experienced and his family experience, right? It sounds like a cool family adventure if you get into it. Lehi is a father with several children, some of which are prudent and some are careless, and we'll go into that, because I had a fun time remembering things that were invoked by utilizing the words prudent and careless when talking about kids. Because everyone's got a good story, y'all, about when you were a kid and you did something bozo, or your kids did something bozo, right? There used to be a show called like Kids Say the Darndest Things, and it's hilarious. Oh, there was one thing I saw on Instagram where some kids were drawing things at class, and it looked like when I grow up, my mommy I want to be like my mommy, and it showed her what looked like it was on a pole, and she was dancing and people were handing her money, and the mom wrote back to the teacher, like Mrs. Jones, I think, was like, I want to clarify this drawing my daughter made because I work at Home Depot, and because of the recent snowstorm, people came in and we sold out of shovels. So this is me, and I told my daughter about how I sold the last shovel at work, and so this is her demonstrating that I have the last snow shovel and people are giving me money for it. Oh, tell me that's not adorable, right? Children are often utilized being described as prudent and careless because children are in an obvious state of learning, right? When a human being that hasn't been on this planet for as long as other humans that have been on the planet, they're in a very obvious state of learning, right? You don't trust a child, a 1-year-old, to go drive a car, at least not yet, based on how we utilize human cognition. However, it's very obvious, right? You don't hold a 1-year-old, a child, to the same standards, not even the legal system does that, to the same standards that you would anticipate adult to demonstrate as far as levels of understanding go. So it's funny that Lehi's basically has a couple kids that did kid things, right? I think he had sons. Tell me boys aren't hard to raise, right? Girls are hard to raise. I was a doozy growing up, man. My parents, I was prudently careless multiple times during my youth. My parents stopped buying me shoes, brand new shoes, and just buy them from the thrift store because I would go through them so much because of how hard I would play outside. I loved playing outside, no shoe. I remember one time my dad, for my birthday, bought me a pair of army boots from the Goodwill or whatever. And I was so excited because I thought they were indestructible. And I destroyed them in like 2 weeks. Because we used to live on the edge of a lake. And so I would go to town exploring, man. I was like Lewis and Clark when I was little. At least that's what I thought I was. And my shoes demonstrate it. Okay, anyways. Lehi is also a well-to-do man. Yeah, it sounds like he's a middle-aged or a middle-income dude, if you're talking about modern day. Got his fingers in several pies. what man, what person hasn't tried multiple different opportunities to create a buck, to create wealth and prosperity for their family unit? Okay, that's cool. It's like him trying different jobs. He's an entrepreneur trying different things, and he found success because he kept putting forth effort to pursue an existence that would be easily defined as wealth and accomplished. So, anyways, Lehi is a man of vision and dreams. Yeah, I'd argue every human has visions and dreams about what they desire to become, who believes Jerusalem is on the road to destruction. I mean, that's a fair assessment, right? Because look at the state of the planet. I mean, it's fair to say that chaos and turmoil existed back in those days too, right? He leaves his home with his family in the year 600 BC, and 600 BC. Jerusalem is destroyed around 13 years after their departure. Well, that's fun, right? I mean, coincidentally, you could probably argue, right? It could have been 1 year, it could have been 30 years, it could have been 2 decades, right? For someone to pursue their dreams and to have reason or probable cause to do it beyond themselves, who cares, right? Coincidentally, Jerusalem was destroyed 13 years after departure. It could have happened 77 years after departure. It could have happened 660 years after departure, right? It could have happened in any sort of time frame that you define linear time as. Lehi sends his sons back to Jerusalem twice. Well, that sounds fun. It's like, yo, I forgot some things. Go back and go get them, right? That's cool. And which they did forget things, right? The first time is to retrieve brass plates that contained his genealogy and the writings of the prophets. Now, what father, basically he sent his sons back, like, yo, go get our family history because I forgot it in Jerusalem. Can you go get it for us? I'm like, oh, Dad, yeah, that's actually important. We'll go back for it. Okay, I would too, right? If my dad was like, hey, turns out we found there's some stuff related to our family history in Jerusalem. Would you mind if I paid for you to go back, or would you mind going to Jerusalem to go, see what that's about? I'll be like, yeah, Dad, I'll go. I got my passport. When's the flight leaving? Okay. Some of these writings in the brass plates are from known prophets such as Isaiah. Isaiah is a Hebrew name meaning Yahweh and salvation. That was his comments. While other writings are from prophets unknown to such as the prophet Zenoch. Zenoch comes from the Hebrew word, and he says it in Hebrew, meaning to descend. Oh, those are fun and layered right there, right? Because a name, a label, something that someone is known by, familiar by, carries a lot of meaning and history behind it. And you can see that, right? The term, and to name someone Isaiah, Yahweh is salvation. That invokes a state of tradition, of heritage, of humanity's lineage within existence by invoking naming a child that shows, again, that the creators of that existence, that life's existence, the parents, they revered and saw certain labels, certain words as reverent and sacred, and they wanted to honor that by naming the literal physical life they created after something that they found inspirational. So that's really cool. Zenoch comes from the Hebrew word, and there's Hebrew symbols meaning to descend. And so that could also be symbolic also of a descent. A descent oftentimes is to explore something, right? So from certain contexts and certain paradigms, to descend would mean like to descend into like physical existence, for instance. And so that's a fun name to invoke there. And also the letter Z isn't used very much. So props to the letter Z being utilized there. When they returned from the trip, they brought with them a slave of a military leader. Well, that sounds fun. How many people have gone on a family trip and come back with a new addition to the family beyond a pet? Oh, that makes for a good story. How many people have gone on vacation and they end up adopting an animal? How many people have had a loved one come home being like, I've adopted a kitten. I found this kitten, Oh, I met, because I went to the local home and garden show, because I got a free ticket in the mail, coincidentally. I met a woman. She made a huge, beautiful beekeeping business, where she's saving bees and educating people on the life cycle and the importance of bees. And it all started because her boyfriend came home one day and brought a beehive, being like, babe, I want to raise bees. And she was like, let's do this. How cool is that? And look where she's at now. All because her husband brought home a random life form. right? Lehi did the same thing. When they returned from their first trip, right, his sons did the same thing. They brought back someone. That's fun. And they freed it, right? They saved another life. That's exactly what that person's boyfriend did. And she ended up going into a life, an existence where she promotes and propagates bees. How cool is that? The slave's name was Zoram. And again, another utilization of the letter Z. This often irrelevant and forgotten letter of the alphabet, which coincidentally goes along the lines of freeing a slave, right? I'm surprised it didn't start with an X. This name, okay, and they said in blue, their comments, this name may indicate Zoram has Semitic origins. That is, he was most likely from the Middle East, but not one of the tribes of Israel. His name is a combination of Zu, meaning one of the, and Ram, meaning exalted, one of the exalted. Ooh, that's fun. That's a fun name, right? That's a redemption arc right there for the story of an underdog, right? Someone named one of the exalted, being labeled as a slave in physical existence, and then being saved and rescued by fellow human beings of someone that has prophetic visions and dreams. That's extraordinary. That sounds like the historical version of the Blind Side, the story behind the Blind Side. It's a good movie. If anyone's unfamiliar with the story of the Blind Side, basically this human labeled Michael Orr, who went on to play professional football, was sort of helped and supported by a more privileged, what is defined as a privileged white family. And Michael Orr coincidentally had darker pigmented skin. Almost, probably, could have been similar to the skin pigment of someone that was from the Middle East. Anyways, the second time they returned to Jerusalem was to retrieve a man called Ishmael. Ooh, and again, he says Ishmael means God hears in Hebrew. It sounds more like Yasmael. Okay, oh. That's cool, right? The second time his sons go back to Jerusalem, they get another human being getting introduced, right? They retrieve a man called Ishmael, and coincidentally, that name means God hears. So clearly, these are like great signs for Lehi, right? Can you imagine your sons coming back being like, hey, we picked up a guy named to descend. We picked up descending into physical existence, and God hears while we're in Jerusalem, of all places on this planet. Here you go, Dad. Do you see how extraordinary the symbolism is in this book? Okay. Like Father Lehi, Father Ishmael had both careless and prudent children. Oh, doesn't that sound like a good dad time, right? How many times have two dads gotten together to discuss at a party or a potluck, and they're like, bro, my kid, my son, he ruined another pair of shoes today. Man, I just bought him a brand new pair of shoes, the Nikes. Ugh. And Ishmael's like, oh, no, man. My son, I just paid for him to play soccer, sign him up. And he said he doesn't want to play anymore. He wants to play baseball. I just forked out like $600 for this club team and bought him all this new gear. And all of a sudden he's like, I don't want to play soccer. Oh, kids these days, right, Lehi? And Lehi's like, yeah, man, that sounds much worse than ruining a pair of Nike Ones, right? Anyways, the two fathers clearly become friends, and they united and traveled together as one group. Yeah, that sounds like me and my next door neighbor, my dad, the Gustins, when we were stationed in Washington, my childhood, they had a boat. And we would go on all sorts of family adventures together with them and the cousins, because our neighbor didn't have kids, but they had cousins and stuff. And so we would all go out and have travel together and have so much fun going on camping trips, going out on the boat in the Puget Sound. Oh, I feel ya, Ishmael and Lehi. They most likely traveled on the east side of the Gulf of Aqaba towards the Red Sea, then the Gulf of Aden to the Arabian Sea. This journey takes them 8 years before they settle down on the coast for 2 years. Talk about a family road trip. Can you imagine packing up your entire family and getting in the RV and being like, they probably didn't have an RV back then, right? Just a caravan of camels or whatever it was. They had wheels by this point in humanity's existence. So this journey takes them 8 years, an 8-year family road trip before they finally were like, fellas, let's settle down here. This seems like a good place on the coast. Who doesn't like the coast, right? It's like settling in California. That's why California is so expensive, because it's got some beautiful weather, beautiful views, beautiful opportunities. Yeah. Anyways, During this settled time, they gathered stores to survive and they built a ship. Well, that sounds like another whimsical family adventure, right? They're done traveling over land, so they're like, let's go on a cruise. Let's go on a family cruise. How many families have gone on a cruise together? Good bonding times, right? You can only do so many land road trips. Now it's time to go to the sea. When the careless children, when the adventurous children, when the mischievous children doubted that the prudent children, those are like the nerdy goody two-shoe kids. Right? The kids that you're just like, why can't you be more like the white sheep? And why do you have to be black sheep? You know, something like that. When the mischievous children doubted that the prudent children could build a ship, one of the prudent sons called Nephi. Oh wait, when the careless children doubted the prudent children could build a ship, one of the prudent sons was called Nephi. Okay, so Nephi was the goody two-shoes, right? Nephi was the standout performer, the one that demonstrated he was willing to work hard even in adversarial conditions. So the person I'm talking with wrote his comments, Nephi is derived from ancient Egyptian word NFR, which has an adjective means good and as a noun means goodness. It was probably pronounced Nephi, but readers of the Book of Mormon pronounce it like Nephi. So I think your initial guess on how it's described, whatever, tomato, right? So again, talking about the ideology and linguistics and the symbolism behind the name Nephi. And the name Nephi, good? Who doesn't like that label, right? Who doesn't like to be defined as good? Yeah. Compared to alternatives, I will say, extraordinary is a better word than good. So is magnificent. So is existentially extraordinary. Yeah, all sorts of things. You can go all the town. Good is good too, though. Wherefore, let us be faithful to him. Oh wait, how is it that you have forgotten that the Lord is able to do all? Oh wait, sorry. So he told his brothers, right? Because Nephi got annoyed with his brothers, right? He's like, bro, I'm working on building a cruise ship for us, and y'all are saying it can't be done, right? Obviously, right? Everyone, every child, every human has certain level of inspiration towards effort. Nephi clearly had more inspiration towards effort and curiosity and exploration of existence than perhaps some of the other children or his siblings. So he told them, because he kind of got annoyed probably, right? His temperance breached the threshold. So he said, how is it that you have forgotten that the Lord is able to do all things according to his will? For the children of men, it is so, if it so be that they exercise faith in him. Wherefore, let us be faithful to him. That is very rich and nuanced with layer and meaning that we won't get into. But essentially, right, Nephi is basically saying, hey, y'all, like, I'm putting forth effort towards something that I believe in and care about. What kind of effort are you putting forth towards what you care about? Tell me, right? So that's fun. Then he goes on to say, Nephi has many prophetic dreams and visions like his father did. Makes sense, right? His name literally means goodness or good. One of his visions concerned a tree of life. Ooh, that sounds fun. Who doesn't like life? Better than the tree of death. Those who ate from the tree of life were made fun of. Probably because once they ate from the tree of life, going along with the vibes of Genesis, right? They found out, they became aware they were naked and they got embarrassed, being like, oh God, I have a dad bod, right? And the mom was like, oh, I have a fupa, right? Something like that might have happened. That would have been embarrassing. It would have been embarrassing, right? Because how many people enjoy being naked publicly? Not many. I guarantee. There's few people that like that actually enjoy that and aren't embarrassed. The prudent people ignored those who were making fun of them, while the careless people listened to the other people and fell away from living a good life. That can be said, right? Prudent people could perhaps be classified as people that demonstrate a greater level of understanding, right? So people that demonstrate a greater level of understanding don't necessarily interact as frequently, just coincidentally, with people that are more in states of learning, right? Because oftentimes, right, have you ever heard the terminology like attracts like, or like resonance and things like that? So what that essentially is, right, if movement patterns like stable, rational movement patterns, then those stable movement patterns are naturally going to gravitate towards like frequencies, like tunement of movement. And so when a human physicality, when movement of a human that is defined as a human demonstrates a greater depth of understanding, that could be classified as prudent, right? as someone that has a greater depth of clarity and understanding of existence, they will naturally encounter people and be made fun of by people who are less aware, because they will be perceived as perhaps irrational, delusional, out of touch with reality, things like that, right? That's how oftentimes when people are perceiving just a snapshot of someone's life, it can be perceived as irrational, because again, you're only seeing one data point out of a longevity of existence of a person's life. So for careless people, I would say careless people are people that are in a more profound state of ignorance or a profound state of learning. So it's harder for them, again, to become aware of greater depths of understanding of the prudent people if the prudent people haven't demonstrated a capacity to explain and articulate themselves, which is oftentimes why they ignore those that are defined as ignorant or careless. However, all of them are human at the end of the day. But living a state of ignorance, right, living in a state of learning is a lot more challenging to live a good life, because it is more turbulent. There's less understood. When there's less understanding involved in navigating existence, it's going to seem more chaotic and turbulent, just like how the world looks, right? The world looks real chaotic and turbulent right now and uncertain. Well, from certain perspectives, yes. Anyways, Nephi said that the future inhabitants of the Americas would bring with them a book of the gospel of the Lamb, in which many plain and precious parts were taken away. Okay, the people that read the book of the Lamb were blinded because of the things that had been taken out of the book. He saw that a great many stumbled, so that Satan had greater dividing power over them. So I think what's exactly happening here was what everyone normally demonstrates, what Nephi goes through, right? Every human goes through. Because from Nephi's perspective, everything that was external to himself that he could perceive, he saw it that people read the book, were blinded because of the things that had been taken out of the book. I would say that Nephi, to the level that he could understand, perceived that people were having trouble understanding to greater depths. There was misunderstanding occurring, and he could perceive it, but he didn't know what to do, and he wanted to help. And so the way he described what was occurring, he said that people took the book of the Lamb and were blinded because of the things that had been taken out of the book, when perhaps maybe he was unable to perceive the full depths of the layers of what was in a book, right? Because every book, I say this a lot in all my videos, every book has something sacred and reverent within it. You just have to be able to perceive it. Every interaction with anything external to yourself is something extraordinary and beautiful, but it just depends on how well you're able to grasp those layers where you can perceive and understand them. So he saw that a great many stumbled, so that Satan had a great dividing power over them. So basically he's saying, hey, I'm perceiving a lot of misunderstanding occurring, and that's driving this state of fear, and a lot of people are stumbling trying to navigate learning existence. And like any human being, right, a state of empathy was invoked to him, and he was like, I want to help others, right? A lot of people often describe as one of the greatest things to experience or help or do in life is benevolence and compassion, and to do that and share and help and support others. So Nephi was trying to do that here. So to correct this, the Lord told Nephi he would bring back his gospel, which would be plain and precious, along with the second book, which would, quote, make known the plain and precious things which were taken away. I would say that, again, human creativity is so extraordinary, but oftentimes that layer of creativity prevents the greater depths from being perceived. And so when it says the Lord told Nephi this, make known the plain and precious things that were taken away, well, that's basically saying I'm going to be able to take any of the words, any of these books, and strip it down to the foundational layer, like the subconscious layer, and make it known in simplistic ways that people can understand it. And I would argue Nephi did that, right, with the Book of Mormon and all his translations and his existence itself. At that point, the people could either choose peace and eternal life or captivity and destruction. Again, free will is a choice. How you choose to think and perceive and cognitively operate and navigate the world is your choice. No one, the concept of free will, no one has the authority to choose how you decide to think, how you decide to interpret the movement patterns that you perceive. So when people are given the choice of greater depth of understanding and perception, well, it's their choice whether they want to learn it or not. Despite the choice between the way of the world and the Church of the Lamb would have relatively few numbers. Yeah, depending on the perspectives, right? But numbers are quite extraordinary because numbers embody themselves recursive mathematics and layers. And that's often lost when talked about mathematics, because we're often taught, or it's often taught in schools, 1 + 1 = 2. And I talked about this in one of my other videos, but when you have 1 + 1 = 2, you're basically stating and assuming that those two things that are defined as 1 are equivalent. And so I utilize this example. If you have 2 apples, or if you have 1 + 1 apple, yeah, it makes 2 apples. However, if you have 1 living human and 1 dead human, technically you have 2 humans. However, 1 dead one and 1 living one wouldn't really do too much good for you, because you're at 50% increased capacity beyond yourself instead of 200% capacity, right? Or you know what I mean with that. So the nuances of relatively few numbers is intriguing, right? It carries layers in itself. And so despite the choice between the way of the world, so I would say that's often equated to materialistic things, right? Possession of deriving a sense of worth and value from physical, tangible reality. Anything that is physically tangible reality that derives a source of inspiration, source of comfort, source of solace, that is, I would say, defined as the way of the world. And which is nothing wrong with that, right? Because, right, I'm wearing clothes. I'm talking to people utilizing the way of the world, right? The way of existence. These are natural tools that innately existence has provided in order to be utilized to its maximum potential. So the Church of the Lamb, then, I would quantify that as the church. I said in another video, I think, or somewhere, or no, I wrote in my comments, the church could be quantified as a state of uniting awareness with understanding, where they're at equal depths and they're simultaneously involved in the capacity to perceive existence. So, while traveling in the wilderness, this united group finds a round ball of curious workmanship. Well, that sounds fun. They found an artifact. They found something curious. And especially to describe it as curious invokes a state of awe and wonder, being like, ooh, what did they find? It has 2 spindles, and they are guided by these spindles. I have no idea what that means, but it sounds like it moves, right? A spindle naturally invokes a state of movement. So they found something, a ball of some sort of curious workmanship that has 2 spindles, right? 2 spindles that are guided by, or it has 2 spindles that are guided by these spindles. So it sounds like the movement patterns that are evoked from these 2 particular masses interacting with one another created something that was perceivable as and defined as curious workmanship. Nephi's brothers are angry with him when he breaks his steel. I have no idea what that means, because that could be invoked in certain things, but it sounds like it was a physical object, because in blue he recounts, we found evidence of steel artifacts as far back as 1800 BC. However, the earliest signs of true steel production are from the 13th century BC in modern day Turkey. This is hundreds of years before Nephi's steel bow was made. So I'm assuming this is talking about an artifact that is a bow made of steel. Cool. Sounds great for that historical context. And again, I think that blurb, and I say it later in my response, which I'll read, was to create evidence for the claims or the words that are being defined in the Book of Mormon. So he makes a 1-on-1 and kills food for the people to eat. Nephi writes, by small means the Lord can bring about great things. Things seem to be going well, and then Ishmael dies at Nahom or someplace. So it sounds like, right? It sounds like they're in the Americas by now, and they're traveling in the wilderness. This united group finds a ball of curious workmanship. To me, I mean, this resembles the story. Oh wait, no, it goes along. This next paragraph. Oh no, they haven't gone to the Americas yet. So whatever the bow he made and he killed food for people to eat, well, that sounds like innovation and ingenuity to me, right? He encountered a certain situation in his life where he lost instruments to procure food. He lost some sort of modality to procure food where he normally was used to. And so he overcame unfamiliarity by creating something new and innovative, a bow, right, out of wood. The amount of workmanship and craftsmanship that is required to even make a functioning bow that is functional enough and sufficient enough to kill a what is defined as game and produce or whatever from nature takes a lot of work, y'all. That takes a lot of clever skill and craftsmanship to make that leap and to put forth the effort to even do it, which unsurprisingly would occur with Nephi because he's already demonstrated, he's classified as the prudent one, which demonstrates, yeah, the more innovative, the more curious one, the more one that's willing to put forth effort. Yeah, he's willing to make a bow. He made a bow out of wood, right? He didn't just go to the store and get perfectly created, cut pieces of wood. He had to go out and cut down a tree and do all that. That's cool. Speaking from experience, right? Because my dad used to do that, or my dad does that. He has literally gone out into the woods, so I'm aware of the process it requires to make a single bow. Y'all, the stuff that they utilize, when you see how Native Americans made a bow, when they killed a deer, there was not a single piece on that deer that was not utilized for some greater purpose to propagate the human race. It's truly extraordinary. Like the sinew, the tendons, everything went into making a bow and to further innovating and helping advance civilization, what is defined as humanity or human. Okay. After many difficult times, they settled in a land they called bountiful because of the many resources that could be found. Right? That sounds like a land flowing with milk and honey, right? In the Bible, they demonstrate a land defined as bountiful. Well, what is not bountiful if defined as a place called milk and honey? So because of the many resources, that sounds wonderful. For a while, they strived to keep the commandments by being faithful and diligent to the law of Moses. Sounds reasonable. Nephi then had a vision of building a ship and crossing the waters. His brothers made fun of Nephi and they didn't want to work on the ship. That sounds about right? Because again, with people that have greater capacity to innovate and create novel discovery, they often aren't understood at first until that cognitive capacity catches on across the species. Most of the group had a mirage of the past and stepped away from what was real. They said it would have been better that we had died before we came out of Jerusalem rather than having to have suffered these afflictions. If we would have stayed, we would have enjoyed our possessions and would have been happy. Well, yeah, like how many people have ever entered into a new opportunity of learning and they're just like, I don't like this. Like how many times do people, right? Because when you get into a state of comfort and familiarity within your life, within your own existence, you're just like, these are good vibes. I like this. Everything's smooth. I have no reason. I have no desire to change this. I have a great career. I have a great retirement. Done. No need for further cognitive growth to actually be pursued. These people, it just sounds like they entered that state being like, hey, we entered this new opportunity, and even though it's a great opportunity for growth, maybe we change our mind. We don't want to grow, actually. We liked what we had, right? How many people have a second guess themselves being like, is this really what I want to do? Like, is this really what I want to be with my life? It sounds like those people were doing the same thing, right? That's another source of inspiration and creativity that could occur. This group finally, but apparently things worked out and the ship got built because this group finally cast off and were sailing on a steady course when they began to relax and forget the power that had made it all possible. Before I get to that though, I want to go back to the sentence he said because it was really good. For a while, they strived to keep the commandments by being faithful and diligent to the law of Moses. I have no idea what that's correlated to, but I would assume it's talking about like the Old Testament and things that were more traditional or that had been linearly around or existed earlier than what is defined as the Book of Mormon's discovery. So because of that, right, the laws of Moses, I think the 10 Commandments I would assume, right, that everyone's aware of, oftentimes, right, laws, right, that things, rules, commandments, they're really good in place until cognition and society evolve beyond the capacity of thought that those concepts originally were created for, right? It's the evolution, it's the growth, it's the product, the outcome of learning. And so for him to state that sentence, right, it's perhaps why even this group of people chose to travel, go on a road trip together, a cruise, because they felt as if the state of existence where they're currently living, like the laws and commandments that they were being faithful and diligent to, perhaps weren't as inclusive or all-encompassing from what they were perceiving and experiencing. So they sought new places to try to live according to those standards of what they desired to perceive, right? So it's a common thing that humans do, right? Because when they encounter change or contrast that based on how they used to, like, traditions or ideals that are conflicting or causing dissonance within their cognitive capacity, they seek a state of stability, and usually that involves physical movement. So this group finally cast off and were sailing on a steady course when they began to relax and forget the power that had made it all possible. Nephi got worried and tried to talk to them, which only made them mad. That sounds, adequate, right? You're going on a family cruise in a boat that you made. Obviously, people are going to be like, did we pack enough snacks? Like, they begin to relax and forget the power that made it all possible, right? They started to maybe enjoy themselves too much. And so Nephi got worried, being like, hey guys, this is serious. Like, stop enjoying the sun and the waves. Like, we're going, there's a greater purpose here. And so they didn't like the vibes, right? Maybe Nephi was being carelessly prudent, right? Trying to kill the fun vibes that were occurring on this family cruise ship that they had built and were all going on an adventure together. And so Nephi got worried, right? Nephi sounds like every person in the family at one point in time in any family occasion that casts the shadow of doubt or tries to raise concerns about being worried about something when everyone else is trying to have a good time that is perhaps perceived in a way that was too relaxing. So, right, Nephi maybe forgot that while they were also sailing to an unknown and foreign place, pursuing, greater things, it was also a fun journey and adventure to get there, right? It's a cruise, right? It's a cruise ship. I don't know what else that is, right? They're traveling somewhere else. What is that? Not a cruise ship? Right? The origin of the concept of a cruise ship right here. This was before the Titanic, They got a lot more advanced than Nephi's days. Anyways, they tied Nephi up. That sounds like something brothers would do. And they said, we will not have our younger brother tell us what to do. Oh, so it was his brothers that tied him up. Right? How many brothers, how many siblings have locked a sibling in the closet or played a prank on their sibling and they took it the wrong way, right? That's what it sounds like happened. A furious storm came up that lasted for 4 days, right? Coincidentally, after they tied him up, right? Because they were all aware on a subconscious level, hey, that was probably not a nice thing to do to your brother. He had good intentions in mind. Sure, he's a little bit uptight sometimes, but maybe tying him up after he spent all this effort making this boat and doing this while you guys made fun of him maybe isn't the nicest thing to do to him. And so coincidentally, a storm arose. And it says, this storm seemed to drive them back in the direction they had just come. Well, that sounds like they're backtracking. No one likes that. How many people like to backtrack in life, especially when they're cognitively circling? They finally got scared enough to untie him and the storm stopped. Oh, that is really cool because it's symbolic of an argument, right? Because how many storms occur in life because of words, because of misunderstanding that propagates? I had a beautiful misunderstanding that I clarified with a friend involving the utilization of words. Oh, it was great. It was so extraordinary. I'll get into it another time because this video is going long. So the storms of life, right? He had an argument with his family while they were on a cruise. How many people have had an argument with their family that left them feeling like they were in a sea of conflict? They were in a storm that lasted guaranteed longer than 4 days, right? Some of these storms last for years and eventually end in divorce. Okay, anyways, right? Oftentimes when you're going through a divorce or an argument like that with someone that you love and care about, it does seem like you're backtracking a lot of progress that you potentially made. However, you must remember that the universe expands in all directions. Movement is movement. And so as long as you're continuously demonstrating movement, learning is occurring. Okay, the storm stops, and then he spends a good chunk of time talking about how the currents could potentially coincide. The currents coincide with the geographic location and this and that. And he remarks that coincidentally, Joseph Smith was reported to have once indicated that these people landed on 32 degrees latitude which is consequently the same parallel as Tel Aviv, Israel. That's cool. That's a cool coincidence. I have unsure, right, if Joseph Smith was aware of that when he did that, when he picked Savannah, Georgia, or the 32-degree latitude, but that's cool, right? That's another layer of symbolism, because a lot of origin of the development of human history and human cognition occurred in the area defined as Israel. Then he talks about some animals, things like that. Okay. And he says, this was my first reading of the book of Nephi and what I got out of it. For Nephi, things just seemed to get worse and worse for him. Yeah, because that dude kept demonstrating that he was refusing to give up. He had resilient effort that can be perceived, right? That's like, he had the same level of resilience that like Abraham had with his wife Sarah when they first established the nation of the concept of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, right? Nephi seemed to get things worse. Things seemed to get worse and worse for him because he kept demonstrating he had the higher capacity to unlock further potential. So he was given a lot of extraordinary opportunities in a very short time span of linear time. He was born into a privileged life and then had to leave his home. That was bad enough. How many people have that occurred to, right? Being born into something that is extraordinary, but you don't realize how extraordinary it is till you no longer have it, or you no longer are experiencing or immersed in it. That was bad enough. Yeah, I agree. Every person's done that when they've left home for the first time, right? Empty nesters. Then the people who should have been protecting him and looking out for him, his own two oldest brothers, turned against him. Their hate grew until they plotted to take his life. Man, tell you about a hardship, right? This poor guy, Nephi, just a human getting blow after blow. He sounds like Job, right? The people who should have been protecting him and looking out for him, his source of solace and comfort and inspiration and support and love, turned against him. Ugh, heartbreak. Every protagonist, right? The underdog always has some sort of moment, right? I do like that he goes on and talks a little bit more, but I do like that he ends with the word wow, capital W-O-W. I agree, which coincidentally spells M-O-M, mom. Moms are extraordinary. They are wow. Anyways, this is what I responded with. This was long enough. Okay. Oh, there are so many layers here to digest. This is about to get whimsy. The layers in which you perceived are extraordinary and highlighted how surreal the life of Nephi and his family were. It literally is the ultimate family adventure, complete with family drama, arguments, some fighting, and of course a road trip. Or maybe more descriptively, a transatlantic trip. The details you included in blue appear to be proof or validation of the stories themselves. That isn't necessary because it implies an effort towards demonstrating the book is true. The book itself exists, therefore it is true. People often struggle to understand the nuances of truth, but it is essentially dependent on a human's capability to articulate what they have experienced or observed. To believe that someone's experiences aren't true due to lack of understanding is quite ignorant and assumptive, to say the least. Right? Because oftentimes people argue the concept of what is true and what is not. And it's just like, you do realize what is defined as truth is hinges on one's ability to articulate and explain what they have observed or experienced. So the fact that someone perhaps doesn't have the vocabulary nor breadth of understanding to articulate what they define as true, what they have experienced and observed, is barbaric and rudimentary logic. Like, why entertain that? You know, everything is true because it exists. Okay. This description of how the book describes offspring is no different than current human offspring. Speaking as a former child, I certainly could have been classified as both prudent and careless. Even in some situations, I was carelessly prudent, especially when I was still trying to learn the complexities of opportunities available, courtesy of existence. At the end of the day, I'm sure that Lehi and his wife were quite proud of each of their sons and loved them regardless of their own adventures during moments of profound learning. I have yet to encounter a human who didn't love their own physical creation of life, although it is often articulated and demonstrated in nuanced ways. Children do some often, oh wait, that was a spelling error on me. Children do often comical, intriguing actions, especially as they are still learning to live, right? Some of the stories I shared. Arguably, every human is still learning how to life, especially since the future is in a state of infinite potential and possibility, more commonly referred to as a state of undefined or superposition according to quantum mechanics. The book itself highlights the continuation of the cycles of misunderstanding by providing yet another example of where misunderstanding inspired a tangible reality consisting of violence and chaos through inspired action. Nephi, being portrayed as being rejected by his own blood, his source of solace and comfort, is a state every human has experienced. Everyone has experienced a situation where they believe the people they love and value forsake or abandon them during a moment of perceived need. Moments where life becomes too catastrophic to handle and bear alone, yet the only reality being perceived is silence and stillness from others, right? Because how many times have people experienced a moment where they needed something, where they called someone, where they relied on someone, and that person didn't meet you to the level that you desired or what you were seeking? It's catastrophic, or they don't even show up at all, or they write you off. They do something to you that makes you feel hurt and abandoned. Oh, what an extraordinary opportunity. And I'm going to go into that. But in those moments, look what Nephi did. He stood on his own, only because his family gave him the opportunity to demonstrate what he could accomplish without the necessity of usual sources of comfort and support. Because how extraordinary do you think it makes someone feel with what they have accomplished in their own life when they are deprived of their familiar sources of comfort and support, if that is not their family, right? When people have the opportunity to demonstrate that they are ready for greater opportunities in their own life and existence, the people, the familiar circumstances of their life, including the people, oftentimes step away in order to create and invoke an environment that allows them to recognize you are capable of doing more. So awesome. So it's a huge opportunity. And I tell it to so many people, right? Because oftentimes a lot of children have memories where their parents did something that often can be interpreted as abandonment or recklessness or lack of love. But from a subconscious level, right, what they are demonstrating is, hey, as a child, you demonstrated to some capacity an extraordinary level of being gifted opportunity in the form of effort and challenge. That doesn't happen to every child because not everyone can demonstrate that they are ready to have existential opportunities for learning and understanding. Anywho, I write, you see, only those who demonstrate a capacity for existential opportunity are gifted them. And what grander opportunity to demonstrate the value of one's life than to perform extraordinary feats deprived of a support system, deprived of familiarity, right? That is facing fear head on. When this occurs, the individual demonstrates to themselves they are indeed capable of accomplishing their thoughts and dreams, facing fears, and unlocking the full extent of their beautiful and unique potential. It becomes a source of inspiration, the origin of even myth and folklore, because a single human decided to value and believe in their own existence beyond the definitions of eternity. Anywho, it's quite remarkable what occurs when just a single person on the planet creates a lone ripple, right? Every action, science understands this, every action there's an equal and reciprocal or action, right? Energy moves, energy transforms, but energy fundamentally moves. A single action that a human demonstrates, whether it's through word, whether it's through physical movement, whatever it is, it creates a ripple of energy. Nephi's life, right, and arguably every life on this planet is capable of creating something that transcends the boundaries of space and time itself. Well-timed ripples often lead to profound waves of understanding that propagate across the globe. Anyways, that'll be it for now. That was almost an hour-long whimsy tangent that I made. So I'll upload this and I'll get working on whatever else I'm going to do for today. So thank you guys. Like, keep sending me emails. Keep commenting. I'm having so much fun exploring LDS. So thank you. And remember, all wives matter. And so do all husbands. Okay? So, it's got to be inclusive here. Peace be with you. I have to work on being able to do the Spock sign.